She didn't scream when they found her body, but the condition of her throat told a story louder than any scream ever could. And the strange part is, the last man to see her alive said he was never there at all. Before we go deeper, welcome back to the channel, and if you enjoy dark, unsettling true crime stories like this, a quick subscribe really helps support what we're building here. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it means more than you know. Because this case isn't just about a murder. It's about a man who rewrote his own reality. A woman who vanished into the night. And a single silver chain that somehow became the only witness that never lied. But the question that haunted everyone, the question that still doesn't have a clean answer, was devastatingly simple. If he wasn't there that night, then who was? Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand how a woman ends up strangled on a cold English beach in the middle of the night, you have to understand the man who may, or may not, have put her there. London. Late 1800s. A city of sharp contrasts. Wealth displayed openly on one street. Poverty hidden poorly on the next. A city where the distance between who you were born as and who you desperately wanted to become could feel like an ocean. And for some men, that ocean didn't humble them. It made them dangerous. Herbert John Bennett was born into that distance. Not destitute. Not privileged. Suspended somewhere in the uncomfortable middle, aware enough of what luxury looked like to want it, but without the means or the breeding to access it honestly. And Herbert, from a very early age, decided that honesty was optional. He studied people the way a craftsman studies tools. What made them trust? What made them impressed? What made them open doors they would otherwise keep shut? He took up music. He learned to dance. Not out of passion, out of calculation. In Victorian England, these were the markers of refinement. The signals that separated gentlemen from laborers. Herbert collected them like currency. He was performing a character. And he was good at it. Then he met Mary Jane Clark. She was a piano teacher. Quietly educated. Poised. The kind of woman who had earned her composure through discipline, not performance. She carried herself with a natural dignity that Herbert could never quite manufacture, no matter how hard he practiced. To him, she represented everything he wanted to be adjacent to. Her world smelled like the one he was trying to break into. And so he pursued her. Relentlessly. Charmingly. With promises that floated just high enough above reality to be believed. He spoke of ambition. Of prospects. Of a future being built just around the corner from where they currently stood. Mary Jane listened. And perhaps she saw something real beneath the performance. Perhaps she believed that love could stabilize what ambition had set spinning. She let him in. They married after she became pregnant. It should have been a beginning. Instead, it became the first in a long series of disappointments. The child was stillborn. And in the grief that followed, the kind of grief that strips a relationship down to its bones, what was left between Herbert and Mary Jane was not enough. His promises began to curdle. The wealth he'd spoken of never materialized. The connections he'd hinted at led nowhere. Instead of ascending, they stagnated. And Herbert, rather than confronting his own failures, turned his frustration outward. Onto her. He drifted from job to job like a man allergic to accountability. Grocer's assistant. Shop worker. Sewing machine salesman. Each position ended badly or was abandoned entirely. Whispers followed him about missing money. Customer payments that couldn't be accounted for. Then a fire tore through his grocer business under circumstances that raised eyebrows no one could fully articulate. Herbert always had an explanation. He was the kind of man who could look you directly in the eye while the world burned around him and make you feel like you were the unreasonable one for asking questions. But behind closed doors, with Mary Jane, the explanations had been replaced by something uglier. He was cruel. Not occasionally. Consistently. Words used as instruments of damage. A slow, grinding cruelty that doesn't leave marks anyone can photograph but leaves marks nonetheless. Mary Jane endured it. Stayed through it. Continued raising their daughter Ruby with whatever steadiness she could hold onto while the man she married dismantled himself around her. In 1898, Ruby was born. A daughter. A new life arriving into a household that was quietly falling apart at every seam. Herbert decided the answer was escape. He moved the family to South Africa under the alias Mr. Hood, note the alias, because it matters, claiming a fresh start in a new country would fix what England had broken. It didn't. The weather was brutal, the plan collapsed, and they returned to England exactly as broken as when they'd left. Just more tired. And this time, Herbert made a different calculation entirely. He left the family. Moved into separate lodgings. Cut the visible cord. And then he did something that reveals the specific architecture of his character. He didn't just leave. He erased them. Mary Jane, Ruby, the marriage, the failures, the stillborn child, the cruelty, all of it, gone. Buried. Smoothed over with a fresh layer of fiction. He reinvented himself completely. This new Herbert was unmarried. Successful. A man of experience and quiet means. A traveler with stories. And into this carefully constructed new life walked Alice Meadows. Alice was warm. Trusting. She had no reason to suspect the man presenting himself to her was anything other than what he claimed. He was charming. Attentive. He told her stories of places he'd been, opportunities he was pursuing, a future that glittered with possibility. She fell for him the way people fall for a beautifully told story, completely, and without defense. By the summer of 1900, Herbert and Alice were in Great Yarmouth together. Walking the promenade. Taking in the sea air. The picture of an uncomplicated couple with nothing to hide and everything to look forward to. Now here is where you need to stop and sit with what Herbert did next. Because it is perhaps the most telling thing about him in this entire story. He invited Mary Jane to Great Yarmouth. The same town. The same time. While Alice was there. He arranged for Mary Jane and Ruby to lodge separately, quietly, under the name Mrs. Hood. Same alias. Same careful compartmentalization. He placed his wife in a backstreet boarding house and moved between her and his fiancée like a man managing a schedule, not a man managing two human lives. What was he thinking? Was this arrogance? Control? Did he believe he could keep these two worlds rotating on separate axes indefinitely? Or had he already decided, somewhere in the cold and calculated part of himself, that one of these worlds was about to end? Mary Jane, during those days, was quiet. Those who saw her described her as reserved. Withdrawn. She spoke little. She kept mostly to herself. But she was always wearing the silver watch and chain. A delicate piece that had belonged to her grandmother. Inherited. Irreplaceable in the way that objects tied to lost people always are. She wore it every day. Every evening. She was wearing it on September 22, 1900. That evening, Mary Jane left her lodgings to meet a man at the train station. Witnesses saw them together, walking toward South Beach. A secluded stretch of coastline. The kind of place that exists in every seaside town, beautiful in daylight, isolating in the dark. She was never seen alive again. The following morning, her body was found on the sand. She was lying face up, her throat bound tightly with a piece of lace. Not loosely. Not hastily. Tightly. With deliberate, sustained force. The kind of binding that requires intention. That requires time. That requires the person doing it to be completely certain of what they are doing while they are doing it. The silver watch and chain were gone. For several agonizing days, investigators had nothing. She was unidentified. A woman with no name in a town she'd arrived in quietly, lodging under a false name, known to almost no one. The kind of disappearance that, in 1900, could have stayed invisible forever. But then, a laundry mark. A small, almost overlooked mark on her clothing, traced back to Bexley Heath. That single thread pulled the entire picture into focus. Her identity confirmed. Mary Jane Bennett. Wife. Mother of Ruby. The woman quietly lodging as Mrs. Hood. And suddenly every question pointed in the same direction. Who had arranged for her to be in Great Yarmouth? Who had known she was there? Who was the man she had left to meet that night? Police found Herbert in Woolwich. Composed. Engaged to Alice. Building his clean, uncomplicated new life with steady hands and calm eyes. When they came to him, he didn't panic. Didn't stumble. He looked at them and told them plainly that he had not been in Great Yarmouth. Not in September. Not in August. Not at all. It was a bold statement. It was also demonstrably, catastrophically false. Hotel staff remembered him clearly. Not vaguely, not uncertainly, clearly. Alice Meadows confirmed the August holiday. There were receipts placing him in the town. Letters in his possession. And in his lodgings, among his belongings, investigators found a wig and a false mustache. Let that sit for a moment. A wig. A false mustache. Hidden away by a man who claimed he had never needed to disguise himself in Great Yarmouth because he had never been there. And there was the watch. A woman's silver watch and chain, sitting in Herbert's room. Witnesses who had seen Mary Jane in the days before her death, including the tintype photograph taken of her shortly before she died, confirmed she had been wearing a chain. The same delicate links. The same distinctive style. The chain in Herbert's room looked exactly like the one that disappeared the night Mary Jane was strangled. Herbert had an explanation. He always had an explanation. But this time, the explanations were built on sand, and the tide was coming in. The trial opened at the Old Bailey in February 1901. 6 days. 30 witnesses. One by one, they walked into that courtroom and, piece by piece, they dismantled every wall Herbert had built. Mrs. Elliston testified about the cruelty. About specific incidents. About the way Herbert spoke to Mary Jane, not just harshly, but with a deliberate venom that signaled something beyond frustration. Something that had curdled into genuine hatred. She described a man who had stopped seeing his wife as a person and started seeing her as an obstacle. Witnesses from Great Yarmouth placed him in the town during the exact period he denied ever being there. Hotel staff. Local residents. People with clear memories and no motive to fabricate them. Alice Meadows took the stand. And what she gave the court, quietly, honestly, painfully, was the clearest window into Herbert's character that the trial produced. She described the man she loved. The stories he'd told her. The tenderness he'd performed. And in describing how completely she had believed him, she revealed, without intending to, exactly how skilled he was at constructing alternate realities. He had looked this woman in the eyes, day after day, and fed her a fiction. And she had loved the fiction with everything she had. Herbert sat through it all without breaking. Composed. Controlled. Performing calm the way he'd always performed everything, with the specific stillness of a man who has decided that nothing on the outside will betray what is happening on the inside. The jury did not deliberate long. Guilty. He was sentenced to death. Executed at Norwich Prison on March 21, 1901. He maintained his innocence to the end. Standing at the edge of everything, he still held the story together. Still refused to let the performance collapse. Mary Jane's daughter Ruby went to live with her maternal grandfather. A little girl who lost her mother to violence and her father to a hangman's rope before she was old enough to hold either loss in her hands. For 13 years, the case settled. Closed. filed. The world moved on. And then July 14, 1914 arrived. A woman named Dora May Gray was found on South Beach, Great Yarmouth. Strangled. A ligature around her throat. Left on the same stretch of shoreline where Mary Jane Bennett had been found 14 years earlier. Same location. Same method. Same deliberate violence. Same silence from the sea. Herbert Bennett had been dead for 13 years. The questions that had never fully quieted came back in full force. If Herbert killed Mary Jane, then who killed Dora? A different killer who happened to choose the same beach, the same method, the same silence. Or had a guilty man been walking free for over a decade while an innocent one rotted in a grave? Dora May Gray's murder was never solved. And that unsolved case is the stone in the shoe of the Bennett verdict. You can try to walk past it. You can call it coincidence, different killer, same location, the world is full of terrible men. But the unease doesn't leave. It follows you out of the story and into your thoughts afterward. Because here is the truth this case has always carried. Every single piece of evidence against Herbert Bennett was circumstantial. Every piece. Compelling, yes. Damning, arguably. But not one witness saw him with Mary Jane in those final hours. Not one person watched what happened on that beach. Not one piece of evidence put his hands on her throat. What the prosecution built was a portrait, detailed, dark, persuasive. A man with motive. The wife who knew too much about the life he was trying to escape. A man with opportunity. Both of them in the same town, a meeting arranged in the dark. A man with character, cruelty on record, deception documented, aliases used casually, a disguise hidden in his room. But a portrait is not a confession. Motive is not proof. And character evidence, no matter how damning, has sent innocent men to their deaths before and has done so since. The silver chain connected him to the scene. The photograph showed Mary Jane wearing something similar. But similar is a dangerous word in a capital case. Similar has destroyed lives. Similar has also freed them. Herbert Bennett may have been the worst kind of man. A liar. A manipulator. A coward who abandoned his family and reinvented himself while his wife scraped together whatever life she could. He was cruel to the woman who married him and dishonest to the woman who came after. But cruelty is not murder. Deception is not strangulation. And men who are deeply, provably guilty of being terrible human beings are sometimes, not always, but sometimes, innocent of the specific crime they hang for. We will never know with certainty what happened on South Beach on the night of September 22, 1900. That night belongs to the dark now. The sand held no record. The sea gave nothing back. What we have is this. A silver chain. A photograph. A laundry mark that gave a dead woman her name back. A little girl named Ruby, growing up without parents. A man who went to his death with the same composure he'd carried through every lie he'd ever told. And 14 years later, on the same beach, another woman. Another ligature. Another silence. And no answer. No arrest. No resolution. Just the question, drifting back in with the tide. If he wasn't there that night, then who was? That question doesn't leave you, does it? That's the thing about cases like this. They don't wrap up cleanly. They don't hand you a bow and send you home satisfied. They leave a door open, just wide enough for doubt to slip through and live rent-free in your mind long after the story ends. So I need to hear from you. Drop your verdict in the comments right now. Guilty, or did England hang the wrong man? Because I've sat with this case longer than I'd like to admit, and I still go back and forth. And honestly, the most interesting answers I've ever gotten on this channel haven't come from me. They've come from you. So don't just watch and scroll. Say something. Your perspective on this one genuinely matters. And if you made it all the way to the end of this story, I want you to know that means everything. Seriously. In a world where attention is pulled in 1,000 directions every single second, the fact that you stayed, that you followed Mary Jane's story from beginning to end, that you let it matter, that's not nothing. That's everything this channel is built on. So if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button. It costs you nothing and it tells me directly that these stories are worth telling. That the research, the late nights, the care put into every single word, it's landing somewhere. It's reaching someone. And trust me when I say, the case is coming next. They're darker. Stranger. More unsettling than this one. Stories that haven't been told the way they deserve to be told. Not yet. But they're coming. Subscribe so you don't miss them. Share this video with someone who loves true crime, because the best conversations always start with someone saying, "Did you hear about this case?" I'll see you in the next one.